Constitution of India, list of all articles, 1 to 395, and parts, 1 to 22. If you are searching for an index or summary of the Constitution of India, updated up to the latest constitutional amendments, this post should be the right place to start with. Constitution of India contains 395 articles in 22 parts. Additional articles and parts are inserted later through various amendments. There are also 12 schedules in the Indian Constitution. Links are given against each part to understand the purpose and background of each article of the Constitution of India. Titles are mentioned for all articles from 1 to 395, separated under various parts and chapters. Preamble and repealed articles or parts are specially mentioned. Preamble. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic and to secure to all its citizens, justice, social, economic and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation, in our Constituent Assembly this 26th day of November 1949. Do hereby adopt, enact and give to ourselves this Constitution. Part 1. The Union and its territory. 1. Name and territory of the Union. 2. Admission or establishment of new states. 2. A.M. Repeal. 3. Formation of new states and alteration of areas, boundaries or names of existing states. 4. Laws made under Articles 2 and 3 to provide for the amendment of the first and the fourth schedules and supplemental, incidental and consequential matters. Part 2. Citizenship. 5. Citizenship at the commencement of the Constitution. 6. Rights of citizenship of certain persons who have migrated to India from Pakistan. 7. Rights of citizenship of certain migrants to Pakistan. 8. Rights of citizenship of certain persons of Indian origin residing outside India. 9. Persons voluntarily acquiring citizenship of a foreign state not to be citizens. 10. Continuance of the rights of citizenship. 11. Parliament to regulate the right of citizenship by law. Part 3. Fundamental rights. General 12 definition. 13. Laws inconsistent with or in derogation of the fundamental rights. Right to equality. 14. Equality before law. 15. Prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex or place of birth. 16. Equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. 17. Abolition of untouchability. 18. Abolition of titles. Right to freedom. 19. Protection of certain rights regarding freedom of speech, etc. 20. Protection in respect of conviction for offences. 21. Protection of life and personal liberty. 21. A.M. Right to education. 22. Protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. Right against exploitation. 23. Prohibition of traffic in human beings and forced labour. 24. Prohibition of employment of children in factories, etc. Right to freedom of religion. 25. Freedom of conscience and free profession, practice and propagation of religion. 26. Freedom to manage religious affairs. 27. Freedom as to payment of taxes for promotion of any particular religion. 28. Freedom as to attendance at religious instruction or religious worship in certain educational institutions. Cultural and educational rights. 29. Protection of interests of minorities. 30. Right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. 31. Repeal. Saving of certain laws. 31. A saving of laws providing for the acquisition of estates, etc. 31b. Validation of certain acts and regulations. 31c. Saving of laws giving effect to certain directive principles. 31d. Repeal. Right to constitutional remedies. 32. Remedies for enforcement of rights conferred by this part. 32a. Repeal. 33. Power of Parliament to modify the rights conferred by this part in their application to forces, etc. 34. Restriction on rights conferred by this part while martial law is in force in any area. 35. Legislation to give effect to the provisions of this part. Part 4. Directive Principles of State Policy. 36. Definition. 37. Application of the principles contained in this part. 38. State to secure a social order for the promotion of the welfare of the people. 39. Certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. 39. Equal justice and free legal aid. 40. The organization of village panchayats. 41. Right to work, to education, and to public assistance in certain cases. 42. Provision for just and humane conditions of work and maternity relief. 43. Living wage, etc., for workers. 43. A participation of workers in the management of industries. 43b. Promotion of cooperative societies. 44. Uniform civil code for the citizens. 45. Provision for free and compulsory education for children. 46. Promotion of educational and economic interests of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other weaker sections. 47. Duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living and to improve public health. 48. The organization of agriculture and animal husbandry. 48. A protection and improvement of environment and safeguarding of forests and wildlife. 49. Protection of monuments and places and objects of national importance. 50. Separation of judiciary from the executive. 51. Promotion of international peace and security. Part IVA. Fundamental duties. 51. Of fundamental duties. Part 5. The Union. Chapter 1. The Executive. The President and Vice President. 50 to the President of India. 53. The Executive Power of the Union. 54. Election of President. 55. Manner of election of President. 56. Term of office of President. 57. Eligibility for re-election. 58. Qualifications for election as President. 59. Conditions of the President's office. 60. Oath or affirmation by the President. 61. Procedure for impeachment of the President. 62. Time of holding the election to fill the vacancy in the office of President and the term of office of person elected to fill the casual vacancy. 63. The Vice President of India. 64. The Vice President to be ex officio Chairman of the Council of States. 65. The Vice President to act as President or to discharge his functions during casual vacancies in the office or during the absence of President. 66. Election of Vice President. 67. Term of office of Vice President. 68. Time of holding the election to fill the vacancy in the office of Vice President and the term of office of person elected to fill the casual vacancy. 69. Oath or affirmation by the Vice President. 70. Discharge of President's functions in other contingencies. 71. Matters relating to or connected with the election of a President or Vice President. 72. Power of President to grant pardons, etc., and to suspend, remit or commute sentences in certain cases. 73. The extent of executive power of the Union. Council of Ministers. 74. Council of Ministers to aid and advise the President. 75. Other provisions as to ministers. The Attorney General for India. 76. Attorney General for India. Conduct of government business. 77. Conduct of business of the Government of India. 78. Duties of Prime Minister as respects the furnishing of information to the President, etc. Chapter 2. Parliament. General. 79. Constitution of Parliament. 80. Composition of the Council of States. 81. Composition of the House of the People. 82. Readjustment after each census. 83. Duration of Houses of Parliament. 84. Qualification for membership of Parliament. 85. Sessions of Parliament, prorogation and dissolution. 86. Right of President to address and send messages to Houses. 87. Special address by the President. 88. Rights of Ministers and Attorney General as respects Houses. Officers of Parliament. 89. The Chairman and Deputy Chairman of the Council of States. 90. Vacation and resignation of and removal from the office of Deputy Chairman. 91. Power of the Deputy Chairman or other person to perform the duties of the office of or to act as Chairman. 90. To the Chairman or the Deputy Chairman not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. 93. The Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the House of the People. 94. Vacation and resignation of and removal from the offices of Speaker and Deputy Speaker. 95. Power of the Deputy Speaker or other person to perform the duties of the office of or to act as Speaker. 96. The Speaker or the Deputy Speaker not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. 97. Salaries and allowances of the Chairman and Deputy Chairman and the Speaker and Deputy Speaker. 98. Secretariat of Parliament. Conduct of business. 99. Oath or affirmation by members. 100. Voting in Houses, power of Houses to act notwithstanding vacancies and quorum. Disqualifications of members. 101. Vacation of seats. 10. To disqualifications for membership. 103. Decision on questions as to disqualifications of members. 104. Penalty for sitting and voting before making oath or affirmation under Article 99 or when not qualified or when disqualified. Powers, privileges and immunities of Parliament and its members. 105. Powers, privileges, etc. of the Houses of Parliament and of the members and committees thereof. 106. Salaries and allowances of members. Legislative procedure. 107. Provisions as to introduction and passing of bills. 108. Joint sitting of both houses in certain cases. 109. Special procedure in respect of money bills. 110. Definition of money bills. 111. Assent to bills. Procedure in financial matters. 112. Annual financial statement. 113. Procedure in Parliament with respect to estimates. 114. Appropriation bills. 115. Supplementary, additional or excess grants. 116. Votes on account, votes of credit and exceptional grants. 117. Special provisions as to financial bills. Procedure generally. 118. Rules of procedure. 119. Regulation by law of procedure in Parliament in relation to financial business. 120. Language to be used in Parliament. 121. Restriction on discussion in Parliament. 122. Courts not to inquire into proceedings of Parliament. Chapter 3. Legislative powers of the President. 123. Power of President to promulgate ordinances during recess of Parliament. Chapter 4. The Union Judiciary. 124. Establishment and Constitution of Supreme Court. 124. A National Judicial Appointments Commission. Declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, however not repealed by the Parliament. 124b. Functions of Commission. 124c. Power of Parliament to make law. 125. Salaries, etc., of judges. 126. Appointment of Acting Chief Justice. 127 Appointment of ad hoc judges. 128 Attendance of retired judges at sittings of the Supreme Court. 129 Supreme Court to be a court of record. 130 Seat of Supreme Court. 131 Original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. 131A, repealed. 132 Appellate jurisdiction of Supreme Court and appeals from High Courts in certain cases. 133 Appellate jurisdiction of Supreme Court and appeals from High Courts in regard to civil matters. 134 Appellate jurisdiction of Supreme Court in regard to criminal matters. 134 A certificate for appeal to the Supreme Court. 135 Jurisdiction and powers of the Federal Court under existing law to be exercisable by the Supreme Court. 136 Special leave to appeal by the Supreme Court. 137 Review of judgments or orders by the Supreme Court. 138 Enlargement of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. 139 Conferment on the Supreme Court of powers to issue certain writs. 139 A transfer of certain cases. 140 Ancillary powers of Supreme Court. 141 Law declared by Supreme Court to be binding on all courts. 142 Enforcement of decrees and orders of Supreme Court and orders as to discovery, etc. 143 Power of President to consult Supreme Court. 144 Civil and judicial authorities to act in aid of the Supreme Court. 144A, repealed. 145 Rules of Court, etc. 146 Officers and servants and the expenses of the Supreme Court. 147 Interpretation. Chapter 5, Controller and Auditor General of India. 148 Controller and Auditor General of India. 149 Duties and powers of the Controller and Auditor General. 150 Form of accounts of the Union and of the States. 151 Audit reports. Part 6, the States. Chapter 1, General. 152 Definition. Chapter 2, the Executive. The Governor. 153 Governors of States. 154 Executive power of State. 155 Appointment of Governor. 156 Term of office of Governor. 157 Qualifications for appointment as Governor. 158 Conditions of Governor's office. 159 Oath or affirmation by the Governor. 160 Discharge of the functions of the Governor in certain contingencies. 161 Power of Governor to grant pardons, etc., and to suspend, remit or commute sentences in certain cases. 162 Extent of executive power of State. Council of Ministers. 163 Council of Ministers to aid and advise Governor. 164 Other provisions as to ministers. The Advocate General for the State. 165 Advocate General for the State. Conduct of government business. 166 Conduct of business of the government of a state. 167 Duties of Chief Minister as respects the furnishing of information to Governor, etc. Chapter 3, the State Legislature. General. 168 Constitution of legislatures in states. 169 Abolition or creation of legislative councils in states. 170 Composition of the legislative assemblies. 171 Composition of the legislative councils. 172 Duration of state legislatures. 173 Qualification for membership of the state legislature. 174 Sessions of the state legislature, prorogation and dissolution. 175 Right of Governor to address and send messages to the House or Houses. 176 Special address by the Governor. 177 Rights of Ministers and Advocate General as respects the Houses. Officers of the State Legislature. 178 The Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. 179 Vacation and resignation of, and removal from, the offices of Speaker and Deputy Speaker. 180 Power of the Deputy Speaker or other person to perform the duties of the office of, or to act as, Speaker. 181 The Speaker or the Deputy Speaker not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. 180 to the Chairman and Deputy Chairman of the Legislative Council. 183 Vacation and resignation of, and removal from, the offices of Chairman and Deputy Chairman. 184 Power of the Deputy Chairman or other person to perform the duties of the office of, or to act as, Chairman. 185 The Chairman or the Deputy Chairman not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. 186 Salaries and allowances of the Speaker and Deputy Speaker and the Chairman and Deputy Chairman. 187 Secretariat of State Legislature. Conduct of business. 188 Oath or affirmation by members. 189 Voting in Houses, power of Houses to act notwithstanding vacancies and quorum. Disqualifications of members. 190 Vacation of seats. 191 Disqualifications for membership. 192 Decision on questions as to disqualifications of members. 193 Penalty for sitting and voting before making oath or affirmation under Article 188 or when not qualified or when disqualified. Powers, privileges and immunities of state legislatures and their members. 194 Powers, privileges, etc., of the houses of legislatures and of the members and committees thereof. 195 Salaries and allowances of members. Legislative Procedure. 196 Provisions as to introduction and passing of bills. 197 Restriction on powers of Legislative Council as to bills other than money bills. 198 Special procedure in respect of money bills. 199 Definition of money bills. 200 Assent to bills. 201 Bills reserved for consideration. Procedure in financial matters. 202 Annual financial statement. 203 Procedure in legislature with respect to estimates. 204 Appropriation bills. 205 Supplementary, additional or excess grants. 206 Votes on account, votes of credit and exceptional grants. 207 Special provisions as to financial bills. Procedure generally. 208 Rules of procedure. 209 Regulation by law of procedure in the legislature of the state in relation to financial business. 210 Language to be used in the legislature. 211 Restriction on discussion in the legislature. 212 Courts not to inquire into proceedings of the legislature. Chapter 4 Legislative power of the governor. 213 Power of governor to promulgate ordinances during recess of legislature. Chapter 5 The high courts in the states. 214 High courts for states. 215 High courts to be courts of record. 216 Constitution of high courts. 217 Appointment and conditions of the office of a judge of a high court. 218 Application of certain provisions relating to Supreme Court to high courts. 219 Oath or affirmation by judges of high courts. 220 Restriction on practice after being a permanent judge. 221 Salaries, etc., of judges. 222 Transfer of a judge from one high court to another. 223 Appointment of acting chief justice. 224 Appointment of additional and acting judges. 224 Appointment of retired judges at sittings of high courts. 225 Jurisdiction of existing high courts. 226 Power of high courts to issue certain writs. 226A repealed. 227 Power of superintendence over all courts by the high court. 228 Transfer of certain cases to high court. 228A repealed. 229 Officers and servants and the expenses of high courts. 230 Extension of jurisdiction of high courts to union territories. 231 Establishment of a common high court for two or more states. Chapter 6 Subordinate courts. 233 Appointment of district judges. 233 A validation of appointments of and judgments, etc., delivered by certain district judges. 234 Recruitment of persons other than district judges to the judicial service. 235 Control over subordinate courts. 236 Interpretation. 237 Application of the provisions of this chapter to certain class or classes of magistrates. Part 7 The states in Part B of the first schedule. 238 Repealed. Part 8 The union territories. 239 Administration of union territories. 239 A creation of local legislatures or council of ministers or board for certain union territories. 239 are special provisions with respect to Delhi. 239 a provision in case of failure of constitutional machinery. 239 be power of the administrator to promulgate ordinances during recess of legislature. 240 power of president to make regulations for certain union territories. 241 high courts for union territories. 242 repealed. Part 9 The panchayats. 243 Definitions. 243 A Gram Sabha. 243b Constitution of panchayats. 243c Composition of panchayats. 243d Reservation of seats. 243e Duration of panchayats, etc. 243f Disqualifications for membership. 243g Powers, authority and responsibilities of panchayats. 243h Powers to impose taxes by and funds of the panchayats. 243-I Constitution of Finance Commission to review financial position. 243j Audit of accounts of panchayats. 243k Elections to the panchayats. 243l Application to union territories. 243m Part not to apply to certain areas. 243n Continuance of existing laws and panchayats. 243-O Bar to interference by courts in electoral matters. Part IXA The municipalities. 243p Definitions. 243q Constitution of municipalities. 243r Composition of municipalities. 243s Constitution and composition of wards committees, etc. 243t Reservation of seats. 243u Duration of municipalities, etc. 243v Disqualifications for membership. 243w Powers, authority and responsibilities of municipalities, etc. 243x Power to impose taxes by and funds of the municipalities. 243 Finance Commission. 243z Audit of accounts of municipalities. 243za Elections to the municipalities. 243zb Application to union territories. 243zc Part not to apply to certain areas. 243zd Committee for district planning. 243zd Committee for metropolitan planning. 243zf Continuance of existing laws and municipalities. 243zg Bar to interference by courts in electoral matters. Part IXB The cooperative societies. To 43ZH definitions to 43ZI incorporation of cooperative societies to 43ZJ number and term of members of the board and its office bearers. 243ZK election of members of board. To 43ZL supersession and suspension of the board and interim management. To 43ZM audit of accounts of cooperative societies. To 43ZN convening of general body meetings. To 43ZO right of a member to get information. To 43ZP returns. To 43ZQ offences and penalties. To 43ZR application to multi-state cooperative societies. To 43ZS application to union territories. To 43ZT continuance of existing laws. Part 10. The scheduled and tribal areas. To 44 administration of scheduled areas and tribal areas. To 44 a formation of an autonomous state comprising certain tribal areas in Assam and creation of local legislature or council of ministers or both therefore. Part 11. Relations between the union and the states. Chapter 1. Legislative relations. Distribution of legislative powers. 245 extent of laws made by Parliament and by the legislatures of states. 246 subject matter of laws made by Parliament and by the legislatures of states. 246 a special provision with respect to goods and services tax. 247 power of Parliament to provide for the establishment of certain additional codes. 248 residuary powers of legislation. 249 power of Parliament to legislate with respect to a matter in the state list in the national interest. 250 power of Parliament to legislate with respect to any matter in the state list if a proclamation of emergency is in operation. 251 inconsistency between laws made by Parliament under Articles 249 and 250 and laws made by the legislatures of states. 252 power of Parliament to legislate for two or more states by consent and adoption of such legislation by any other state. 253 legislation for giving effect to international agreements. 254 inconsistency between laws made by Parliament and laws made by the legislatures of states. 255 requirements as to recommendations and previous sanctions to be regarded as matters of procedure only. Chapter 2. Administrative relations. General. 256 obligation of states and the union. 257 control of the union over states in certain cases. 257a repeal. 258 power of the union to confer powers, etc., on states in certain cases. 258 a power of the states to entrust functions to the union. 259 repeal. 260 jurisdiction of the union in relation to territories outside India. 261 public acts, records and judicial proceedings. Disputes relating to waters. 262 adjudication of disputes relating to waters of interstate rivers or river valleys. Coordination between states. 263 provisions with respect to an interstate council. Part 12. Finance, property, contracts and suits. Chapter 1. Finance. General. 264 Interpretation. 265 Taxes not to be imposed save by authority of law. 266 Consolidated funds and public accounts of India and of the states. 267 Contingency fund. Distribution of revenues between the union and the states. 268 Duties levied by the union but collected and appropriated by the state. 268a repeal. 269 Taxes levied and collected by the union but assigned to the states. 269 a levy and collection of goods and services tax in the course of interstate trade or commerce. 270 Taxes levied and distributed between the union and the states. 271 Surcharge on certain duties and taxes for purposes of the union. 272 repeal. 273 Grants in lieu of export duty on jute and jute products. 274 Prior recommendation of President required to bills affecting taxation in which states are interested. 275 Grants from the Union to certain states. 276 Taxes on professions, trades, callings and employments. 277 Savings. 278 repeal. 279 Calculation of net proceeds, etc. 279 a Goods and Services Tax Council. 280 Finance Commission. 281 Recommendations of the Finance Commission. Miscellaneous financial provisions. 282 Expenditure defrayable by the union or a state out of its revenues. 283 Custody, etc., of consolidated funds, contingency funds and monies credited to the public accounts. 284 Custody of suitors' deposits and other monies received by public servants and courts. 285 Exemption of property of the union from state taxation. 286 Restrictions as to imposition of tax on the sale or purchase of goods. 287 Exemption from taxes on electricity. 288 Exemption from taxation by states in respect of water or electricity in certain cases. 289 Exemption of property and income of a state from union taxation. 290 Adjustment in respect of certain expenses and pensions. 290 Annual payment to certain Devaswam funds. 291 repeal. Chapter 2 Borrowing. 292 Borrowing by the Government of India. 293 Borrowing by states. Chapter 3 Property, Contracts, Rights, Liabilities, Obligations and Suits. 294 Succession to property, assets, rights, liabilities and obligations in certain cases. 295 Succession to property, assets, rights, liabilities and obligations in other cases. 296 Property accruing by escheat or lapse or as bona vacantia. 297 Things of value within territorial waters or continental shelf and resources of the exclusive economic zone to west in the Union. 298 Power to carry on trade, etc. 299 Contracts. 300 Suits and proceedings. Chapter 4 Right to property. 300 A persons not to be deprived of property save by authority of law. Part 13 Trade, commerce and intercourse within the territory of India. 301 Freedom of trade, commerce and intercourse. 302 Power of Parliament to impose restrictions on trade, commerce and intercourse. 303 Restrictions on the legislative powers of the Union and of the states with regard to trade and commerce. 304 Restrictions on trade, commerce and intercourse among states. 305 Saving of existing laws and laws providing for state monopolies. 306 Repeal. 307 Appointment of authority for carrying out the purposes of Articles 301 to 304. Part 14 Services under the Union and the States. Chapter 1 Services. 308 Interpretation. 309 Recruitment and conditions of service of persons serving the Union or a state. 310 Tenure of office of persons serving the Union or a state. 311 Dismissal, removal or reduction in rank of persons employed in civil capacities under the Union or a state. 312 All India Services. 312 A power of Parliament to vary or revoke conditions of service of officers of certain services. 313 Transitional provisions. 314 Repeated. Chapter 2 Public Service Commissions. 315 Public Service Commissions for the Union and for the states. 316 Appointment and term of office of members. 317 Removal and suspension of a member of a Public Service Commission. 318 Power to make regulations as to conditions of service of members and staff of the Commission. 319 Prohibition as to the holding of offices by members of Commission on ceasing to be such members. 320 Functions of Public Service Commissions. 321 Power to extend functions of Public Service Commissions. 322 Expenses of Public Service Commissions. 323 Reports of Public Service Commissions. Part XIVA Tribunals. 323 are Administrative Tribunals. 323B Tribunals for other matters. Part 15 Elections. 324 Superintendence, direction and control of elections to be vested in an election commission. 325 Number person to be ineligible for inclusion in, or to claim to be included in a special, electoral roll on grounds of religion, race, caste or sex. 326 Elections to the House of the People and to the legislative assemblies of states to be on the basis of adult suffrage. 327 Power of Parliament to make provision with respect to elections to legislatures. 328 Power of Legislature of a state to make provision with respect to elections to such legislature. 329 Bar to interference by courts in electoral matters. 329A Repeal. Part 16 Special provisions relating to certain classes. 330 Reservation of seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the House of the People. 331 Representation of the Anglo-Indian community in the House of the People. 332 Reservation of seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the legislative assemblies of the states. 333 Representation of the Anglo-Indian community in the legislative assemblies of the states. 334 Reservation of seats and special representation to cease after 60 years. 335 Claims of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes to services and posts. 336 Special provision for Anglo-Indian community in certain services. 337 Special provision with respect to educational grants for the benefit of the Anglo-Indian community. 338 National Commission for scheduled castes. 338 A National Commission for scheduled tribes. 338 A National Commission for backward classes. 339 Control of the Union over the administration of scheduled areas and the welfare of scheduled tribes. 340 Appointment of a commission to investigate the conditions of backward classes. 341 Scheduled castes. 342 Scheduled tribes. 342 A socially and educationally backward classes. Part 17 Official language. Chapter 1 Language of the Union. 343 Official language of the Union. 344 Commission and Committee of Parliament on Official language. Chapter 2 Regional languages. 345 Official language or languages of a state. 346 Official language for communication between one state and another or between a state and a union. 347 Special provision relating to language spoken by a section of the population of a state. Chapter 3 Language of the Supreme Court, High Courts, etc. 348 Language to be used in the Supreme Court and in the High Courts and for acts, bills, etc. 349 Special procedure for enactment of certain laws relating to language. Chapter 4 Special directives. 350 Language to be used in representations for redress of grievances. 350 Facilities for instruction in mother tongue at the primary stage. 350B Special Officer for linguistic minorities. 351 Directive for development of the Hindi language. Part 18 Emergency provisions. 352 Proclamation of Emergency. 353 Effect of Proclamation of Emergency. 354 Application of provisions relating to distribution of revenues while a proclamation of emergency is in operation. 355 Duty of the Union to protect states against external aggression and internal disturbance. 356 Provisions in case of failure of constitutional machinery in states. 357 Exercise of legislative powers under proclamation issued under Article 356. 358 Suspension of provisions of Article 19 during emergencies. 359 Suspension of the enforcement of the rights conferred by Part 3 during emergencies. 359A Repeal. 360 Provisions as to financial emergency. Part 19 Miscellaneous. 361 Protection of President and Governors and Raj Prakuks. 361 A protection of publication of proceedings of Parliament and state legislatures. 361B Disqualification for appointment on remunerative political post. 362 Repeal. 363 Bar to interference by courts in disputes arising out of certain treaties, agreements, etc. 363 A recognition granted to rulers of Indian states to seize and privy purses to be abolished. 364 Special provisions as to major ports and aerodromes. 365 Effect of failure to comply with or to give effect to directions given by the Union. 366 Definitions. 367 Interpretation. Part 20 Amendment of the Constitution. 368 Power of Parliament to amend the Constitution and procedure therefore. Part 21 Temporary, Transitional and Special Provisions. 369 Temporary power to Parliament to make laws with respect to certain matters in the state list as if they were matters in the concurrent list. 370 Temporary provisions with respect to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. 371 Special provision with respect to the states of Maharashtra and Gujarat. 371 A special provision with respect to the state of Nagaland. 371B Special provision with respect to the state of Assam. 371C Special provision with respect to the state of Manipur. 371D Special provisions with respect to the state of Andhra Pradesh. 371E Establishment of Central University in Andhra Pradesh. 371F Special provisions with respect to the state of Sikkim. 371G Special provision with respect to the state of Mizoram. 371H Special provision with respect to the state of Arunachal Pradesh. 371-I Special provision with respect to the state of Goa. 371J Special provision with respect to the state of Karnataka. 372 Continuance in force of existing laws and their adaptation. 372 A power of the President to adapt laws. 373 Power of President to make order in respect of persons under preventive detention in certain cases. 374 Provisions as to judges of the Federal Court and proceedings pending in the Federal Court or before His Majesty in Council. 375 Courts, authorities and officers to continue to function subject to the provisions of the Constitution. 376 Provisions as to judges of High Courts. 377 Provisions as to Controller and Auditor General of India. 378 Provisions as to Public Service Commissions. 378 A special provision as to the duration of Andhra Pradesh Legislative Assembly. 379 to 391 Repeal. 392 Power of the President to remove difficulties. Part 22 Short title, Commencement, authoritative text in Hindi and repeals. 393 Short title. 394 Commencement. 394 A authoritative text in the Hindi language. 395 Repeals.